Well, this is Ken and Steve again. This is the opening shot of the movie where we start on the Earth and pull back through an infinity of galactic events. Phenomenon. And a very complicated and a very long complicated shot, which took a tremendous amount of effort by a lot of different people.
We approached this initially as any other Earth to solar system pull-out as seen in other films, and we realized we wanted to get a lot more detailed than you'd seen. We were really using 2001 as our jumping-off point, and we knew that it was going to become much more complicated and time-consuming of a process, but we felt it was worth the effort since this was the opening shot in the movie, and Bob really wanted to give this wow imagery.
What also is very complicated about this shot, and it asks a lot of visual effects, is halfway through this, which is really great idea that Bob had, every sound is cut out and it's just dead silent through the last half of this pullout. So basically everyone is just staring and scrutinizing every pixel of information in this shot, and you really aren't looking at anything except the effects work. So it had to be right on the money, because if it failed, it would have been a big failure here. And again, like we mentioned earlier, there's a lot of some of the events or things that you haven't seen before. The Oort cloud, this star placement might have been Vega, so we put it here. It could be where the whole sort of crux of the movie is about, is that one blue star that goes by. And we go out through here on the Eagle Nebula, which once again is what Carl really wanted to see in the movie. That's really a spectacular formation. It's very unusual. Doesn't that look like a dog on the kind of a wire-haired terrier on the right there, crawling up that part of the galaxy?
It is. It's actually one of the artist's dog. He put it in there. No, he didn't. It took quite a bit of time, probably about 6 to 8 weeks, to actually choreograph this whole sequence. Initially, it was going to be about 90 seconds in length. Ultimately ended up about 3.5 minutes. Quite a complex animation in terms of not only getting a very subtle motion that was pleasing. You didn't want to blaze through any of these too quickly. You wanted to appreciate all the beautiful imagery that was passing by, but also in terms of knowing what we were up against in terms of how real we needed to get for some of this galactic phenomenon.
And it really had to make you feel the scale of the universe and how huge and how massive it all was, especially in contrast to the moment right here where we pull out of young Ellie's eye. Again, this is a 3D eye that we're coming out of, blending into the real Jenna's eye. And this scene was shot once before where she had blue contacts in her eye, and it made her look like one of the kids, like the Village of the Damned. So we had to reshoot this close-up and just color her eyes later. These are the people that spilled much blood on this shot and many others in the show.
So in preparing to do this sequence, in terms of gathering images, we started with some of the Hubble books that have some absolutely incredible photos of distant galaxies and stars and other interstellar phenomenon. And we laid out what we liked and said, okay, well, how can we pass through some of this? How can we combine it together into something that was visually stunning? We collected first of images from the solar system, views of the planets. Of course, Saturn's ring was something we talked about. How would we play that if we passed through Saturn's ring? What would it look like? Well, what was the contents of Saturn's rings? What was the surface detail on Mars? What did Jupiter look like if we passed right through the big red eye, including its motion?
His accentuated motion, so it was a little more dramatic. So Jay Red, who is so much into the reality of this, always was fighting us a little bit on that. And this is what you're seeing here is sort of a beginning animatic of the shot. And this is what it looked like. For the longest time, as we were talking to Bob about the speed of different things. So the blue image here is the Earth going away from us.
It's a 3D wireframe or 3D outline of the models that make up the right now the solar system that we're passing through. So
there goes Mars. Here's our asteroid belt. And essentially, this is what was used for timing discussions, what the rhythm of the shot would be for Bob. At the same time, because there was such a crunch on all fronts, this material was being sent up to the sound design guys to see how they wanted to start playing the different bits of information that's playing at the beginning of the shot and how long it was going to go from one transition to the next.
As we left our solar system, we had a little bit more latitude on reality, mainly because we don't know what some of that phenomenon looks like up close. We're passing through the Oort cloud, which is sort of a theoretical cloud of comets that surrounds our galaxy, to which point we only had some basic concept work. We had to figure out how to dimensionalize that, what the Eagle Nebula looks like. Again, we're just sort of taking creative license with that.
I know what the Eagle Galaxy looks like. It looks like Crusader Rabbit. That's what it looks like.
What it would look like if we spin out of our arm of the Milky Way in which we reside, that Magellanic Cloud, the barred galaxy, passing through billions and billions of other galaxies, finally coming to the so-called end of the universe, and then pulling out of the reflection of young Ellie's eye.
Yes, we all did have a breakdown during this shot. That's true.
There were a lot of tools that were employed. We did a lot of the modeling and choreographing in Houdini, Side Effects Houdini. We used particle systems, both in Houdini and Dynamation. Some of the lens flare effects were actually practical stage elements that were touched up as art elements. Some of them were actually just digitally created. The earth textures were complete art elements rendered within Photoshop and then mapped onto a 3D sphere. The light passes the interaction of the sun onto the surface, was rendered using RenderMan. We took a lot of detail photos. We accumulated a lot of detail photos from various Hubble photographs and other NASA photographs to add texture to some of the planet surfaces.
Now I want you to pay close attention here to Mars, because we actually put the face that everyone sees on Mars on this. See if you can find it.
We also made a point of being astronomically correct in terms of adding atmosphere around Mars and Jupiter. You'll see slight blue glow around it, including the polar caps on Mars, things like that we really wanted to pay attention to.
Also, in just a design way, we wanted to I just like the look of the flare of the sun kind of laying over everything else. It ties all the separate elements in. There's the face right there. Of course, it really exists, and it is from a race of Martians. We all know that's true. And again, just slowly and painstakingly starting to layer in and test all the different looks that all these moments have to have. So as we start building the asteroid belt, we're trying to figure out what would be a cool way to come through. There's so much dust in the asteroid belt. What's nice is the way it breaks up the sun in the background is a really nice touch.
Jupiter's planets. We wanted to pass by some of the main big planets. We wanted to study how the big red eye on Jupiter would move. We augmented that motion just for interest's sake.
So again, you're seeing just, different, moments of, work in progress. And we would run this by Bob and talk about what we were going to do with it and see if it got his blessing or not. And this is some of the motion tests for the spinning red eye of Jupiter. Early test that really wasn't working. Of course, that doesn't work at all, but you got to go through things that don't work before you find the one that makes sense.
Again, adding subtleties like the atmosphere around Jupiter and
the moons around Jupiter, which actually it also helps with the scale as it flies by us. When you see a small moon that looks large at the beginning of the shot and suddenly this massive form, looms in from the left.
Now, of course, Saturn is most notable for its rings. The rings are actually fairly narrow, but we wanted to pass through them, and we were talked at great length about what we'd see. Of course, it would be mostly debris, cosmic debris, and some planets in there. We first had to figure out how we would pass through the rings, what was an interesting camera angle through there, and then add in some debris that would look interesting.
That would look debris-like.
Debris-like, yeah. Say something interesting. So this is a theoretical cloud that was based on a piece of concept work that John Lundberg did. John Lundberg is was one of Carl Sagan's primary artists, and in theory, there's these comets that surround our solar system, and we wanted to, because of the lighting situation, the sun being recessing off in the distance, we wanted to make it a little bit more interesting. So we came up with this idea of maybe the sundog type of glints, as if you were looking at some sprinklers moving through, with sprinklers with some sunlight moving through it, giving kind of a halo effect.
What the hell are you talking about?
I don't know. I'm making it up.
So these are the stars that may or may not be Vega, and these are the Hubble photographs of the Eagle Nebula that gave us a starting point for the design of what it would look like to pass through this.
Getting the motion, although it's seemingly simplistic motion, was actually quite difficult. You want to, again, not pass through too fast in order to appreciate the imagery that you're passing through. And you don't want to go through too slowly, or you'll never get done with the shot. So sculpting different key shapes within that nebula as 3D geometry, and then using a combination of particle system and pseudo-volumetric rendering tricks to get the gaseous and dust-like artifacts that we would see in the final look of the nebula. And of course, lighting is a key element of making this piece of nebula come to life. Getting the right background lighting, side lighting, key lighting is very difficult to do. A lot of things go wrong.
So it's really just, again, it's layer upon layer. Months and months and months of work are represented here, of people working around the clock trying to piecemeal this all together. And so you look at these dailies every single day, morning, and then in the afternoon we would go around and check stuff out and make your changes, and it was just a constant process that really went also right down to the wire. It took pretty much the whole schedule of the show to get this opening shot done. This is a giant cat hair ball.
This is the Milky Way as we pull out. We're pulling out of our arm of the galaxy. And that's the supposed look of the center of the Milky Way galaxy.
No, this was a Warner Brothers show.
So as we pull out of the Milky Way, there's the Magellanic Cloud, which is a theoretical cloud that exists outside of our galaxy.
Except we put it in the wrong place, but it looked better in the movie this way.
Yeah, we take a lot of creative license,
Mm-hmm.
strategically placing pretty pictures. This is the barred galaxy. We wanted to pass through this because we felt it was interesting looking. We had to decide how it would look as we passed through from beginning with its mostly just subtle debris into the hot core of the galaxy and then back out. And then we had to round up some distant galaxies, some superclusters of galaxies piled up on top of each other, and put them around our key galaxies as background fill.
And the first galaxies that come in after the barred have a little more detail, a little more dimension than the latter ones as they start to fly in by the hundreds, because you would never be able to pick up on that kind of subtlety at that point. And also the background has been changing through this whole sequence so that you're seeing more, looks like galactic information way in the distance.
This is one of those classic deep space photos from Hubble. Galaxies piled up on each other. You can kind of see a similarity here. And then, of course, we speed up to get out and pull out through young Ellie's eye.
And so we really had to do a transition from the galaxies to a glint that's in her eye. So we had to go to a sort of a whiteout moment here that turns out to be the glint in her eye. These are some early glint ideas at this point, some of them not too successful. No, we don't like that one. This is the one where we introduced the machine reflection in her eye without the rings, because when the rings were in it, it was too obvious that that's what you were looking at.
That's the real young Ellie, the real glint with her brown eyes. And then a 3D eye. We did the 3D eye mostly because, as you see here, there's such an extreme perspective change as you pull out through the eye that just pushing in on the original photography, it would not hold up. It would start getting soft. You wouldn't see any kind of dimensional shift as we pulled past the eyelashes. So we created a 3D model of the eye, the eyeball and the surrounding eye, and then used the original plate and pasted that over the geometry, and then tracked it to the original camera photography. And then as she blinks when we pull out, we transition to the real plate.
Some of those later shots, too, are the ones you just saw. The blue in her eye was pretty intense. She starts looking sort of like an alien herself. So it took a while to figure out how bright we could play the blue, let you read it, but not overdo it.
Notice the... where is that? How many times Ken said this is crap?
I don't think that's what it says.
We think this is, to date, the longest totally computer-generated shot, being 4,710 frames.
Let's hope we never do another one this long.